The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop outside Red River, Montana territory, and Eleanor Orson knew her secret would soon be impossible to hide beneath the folds of her traveling dress. She pressed one trembling hand against the subtle swell of her stomach, concealed for now by the layers of fabric and her loose traveling cloak, but growing more evident with each passing day. 4 months along, and the morning sickness had finally subsided enough for her to make this desperate journey west to marry a man she had never met. The September air in 1878 carried the first hints of the brutal winter that would soon descend upon the mountains, and Eleanor shivered as she peered through the dusty window at the rough collection of buildings that made up Red River. The town sat nestled in a valley surrounded by towering peaks, already dusted with early snow. Log cabins and rough timber structures lined the single muddy street, and Eleanor could see perhaps 24 buildings total, including what appeared to be a general store, a saloon, and a small church with a crooked steeple. This was to be her new home, so far from the Philadelphia streets where she had grown up, so distant from the scandal she had fled. "Red River, miss," the driver called down, his weathered face appearing at the window. "You getting out here?" Eleanor took a steadying breath and nodded. She had nowhere else to go. The man she was to marry, a rancher named Thomas Kimball, had answered her carefully worded advertisement seeking a marriage of convenience. She had been honest about needing to leave the East quickly, though she had not mentioned her condition. She had told herself she would explain everything once she arrived, that surely a man desperate enough to send for a mail-order bride would understand her circumstances. The driver helped her down from the coach, setting her 2 small trunks in the dust beside her. "Kimball's place is about 3 miles north of town," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the mountains. "You wanting me to take you out there?" "I was hoping to meet him in town," Eleanor said quietly. "He was supposed to receive word of my arrival." The driver's expression shifted, growing uncomfortable. He removed his hat and twisted it in his gnarled hands. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, miss, but Thomas Kimball passed on about 2 weeks back. Horse threw him and he broke his neck. Real tragedy." The world seemed to tilt beneath Eleanor's feet. "Dead. But I sent word I was coming. I left everything behind. I have nowhere else to go. I am real sorry, miss. Truly I am." The driver glanced around the street where curious faces had begun to appear in doorways and windows. "Maybe you could speak to Reverend Matthews at the church. He might know of someone who needs help, or another situation that might suit." Eleanor felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. She had cried enough over the past months, cried when she realized she was carrying the child of a man who had promised to marry her, and then disappeared, cried when her father had thrown her out of their home, cried through the long journey west. She would not cry now, not in front of these strangers in this rough mountain town. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely audible. "I will find my way." The driver tipped his hat and climbed back onto the coach, clearly relieved to escape the awkward situation. Eleanor stood alone in the street with her 2 trunks, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, gathering what remained of her dignity. She would not give these people the satisfaction of seeing her despair. Before she could decide which direction to walk, a figure emerged from the general store across the street. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as she watched him approach. He was the largest man she had ever seen, standing well over 6 feet tall with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. His dark hair fell past his collar, slightly unkempt, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin trousers and a rough wool shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful muscles of his chest and arms. Everything about him spoke of raw strength and self-sufficiency, from his confident stride to the rifle he carried casually in one hand. "You are the woman coming to marry Thomas Kimball," he said as he stopped a few feet away. It was not a question. His voice was deep and surprisingly gentle for such a large man, though his expression remained unreadable behind that dark beard. "I was," Eleanor replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. His eyes were a startling shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds over the mountains. "Though I have just learned that Mr. Kimball has passed away, I find myself in rather difficult circumstances." The man studied her for a long moment, and Eleanor had the unsettling feeling that those penetrating eyes could see straight through her clothing to the secret she carried. "You are with child," he said flatly. Eleanor gasped, instinctively wrapping her arms around her middle. "How dare you suggest such a thing? I have spent 20 years in these mountains, madam. I know how to read signs, whether I am tracking elk or observing people. You carry yourself different, careful-like, and you got that look about you." He shifted the rifle to his other hand. "Was the child Kimball's?" "No," Eleanor whispered, the fight draining out of her. What was the point in lying? The truth would be obvious soon enough. "I was engaged to a man in Philadelphia. He promised to marry me, but when I told him about the baby, he disappeared. My father turned me out. I had no choice but to seek a husband elsewhere. I was going to tell Mr. Kimball the truth once I arrived, I swear it. I just needed a chance to explain in person." She waited for judgment, for condemnation, for this intimidating stranger to walk away and leave her to her fate. Instead, he set his rifle against her trunk and removed his hat, revealing more of that wild, dark hair. "My name is Daniel Vaughn," he said. "Most folks around here call me the Mountain Man, on account of I live up in the high country, trapping and hunting. I come into town maybe once a month for supplies. I knew Thomas Kimball. He was a good man, but he was also 53 years old and set in his ways. I am not sure he would have been much of a husband to a young woman like yourself." Eleanor blinked in surprise at the lack of condemnation in his tone. "I am 22 years old, Mr. Vaughn, old enough to understand that marriage is not always about romance. I simply needed security for myself and my child." "And now you have neither security nor a husband," Daniel said. He replaced his hat and seemed to come to some kind of decision. "I have a cabin about 8 miles up in the mountains. It is rough living, harder than anything you have likely known back east, but it is solid and warm and safe. I am heading back there now with my supplies." "You are welcome to come with me." Eleanor stared at him in shock. "Mr. Vaughn, I cannot possibly go off into the mountains with a strange man. That would be highly improper. More improper than arriving in town pregnant and with no husband." His tone was not unkind, merely practical. "Listen, Miss Orson. Eleanor Orson, Miss Orson. I'm not making you any indecent proposals. I am offering you a place to stay while you figure out your situation. Winter comes hard and fast in these mountains. In another month you will be snowed in wherever you are. You can stay at the boarding house in town if you prefer, but I doubt your money will last long, and I doubt anyone here will be eager to employ a pregnant woman with no husband and no references." Every word he spoke was true, and Eleanor knew it. She looked around at the rough buildings of Red River, at the faces still watching from windows and doorways. She could feel their judgment already, could imagine the whispers that would follow her wherever she went. At least in the mountains, isolated in this strange man's cabin, she would be spared the constant scrutiny and gossip. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You know nothing about me. I could be a terrible person." Daniel Vaughn's weathered face softened slightly, and she thought she detected a hint of sadness in those storm cloud eyes. "Let us just say I know what it is like to need help and have nowhere to turn. I am not a man who talks much about the past, but I have made my share of mistakes and been given second chances I did not deserve. Seems only right to offer the same to someone else." Eleanor considered his words, weighed her limited options. Stay in Red River and face the judgment of this small community. Spend her dwindling funds on boarding house fees while trying desperately to find work that no one would give her. Or trust this intimidating but seemingly sincere mountain man and accept his offer of shelter. "If I go with you," she said slowly, "I want your word that you will not force your attentions on me. I want your promise that I will be safe." "You have my word, Miss Orson. I will not lay a hand on you in any way that is not respectful and proper." He met her eyes directly as he spoke, and Eleanor found herself believing him. There was something honest about Daniel Vaughn, something solid and trustworthy beneath his rough exterior. "Then I accept your offer, Mr. Vaughn. Thank you." He nodded once, then bent to lift both of her trunks as if they weighed nothing at all. "I have a wagon behind the store. The ride up to the cabin takes about 2 hours. We should leave now if we want to make it before dark." Eleanor followed him through the muddy street, acutely aware of the stares and whispers that trailed behind them. She held her head high and kept her eyes forward, refusing to show how frightened she truly felt. She was about to disappear into the mountains with a man she had known for less than 10 minutes, gambling everything on the hope that his word was as good as his appearance suggested. The wagon was a sturdy affair pulled by 2 massive draft horses. Daniel loaded her trunks alongside sacks of flour, beans, coffee, and other supplies. He helped her onto the seat with surprising gentleness for such a large man, his hands strong but careful as they steadied her. As they left Red River behind and began climbing into the mountains, Eleanor felt the last threads connecting her to her old life snap and fall away. She was truly alone now, dependent on the kindness of a stranger, carrying a child whose father had abandoned them both. She should have been terrified, and part of her was. But another part, a part she did not fully understand, felt an unexpected sense of relief. The mountain scenery was breathtaking despite her anxiety. Towering pines climbed the steep slopes, and aspens shimmered gold in the afternoon light. A crystalline stream rushed alongside the narrow trail, and Eleanor glimpsed deer watching from the shadows of the forest. The air grew colder as they climbed higher, and she pulled her cloak more tightly around herself. Daniel drove in silence, his attention focused on guiding the horses along the rough trail. Eleanor studied him from the corner of her eye, trying to understand this man who had so unexpectedly altered the course of her life. His profile was strong and masculine, all hard angles and weathered skin. His hands on the reins were massive, scarred from years of hard work. Everything about him spoke of capability and strength. "How long have you lived in these mountains?" she asked finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. 20 years, Daniel replied, his eyes never leaving the trail. "I came out here after the war ended. Needed to get away from civilization, from people and noise and all the things that reminded me of what I had seen. Started trapping and hunting, built my cabin, learned to live off the land. It suits me." "The war," Eleanor repeated softly. "The Civil War." "That is the one." His jaw tightened beneath his beard. "I was at Gettysburg and several other places I would rather forget. When it was over, I could not go back to farming in Ohio like nothing had happened. So I headed west and kept going until I found a place remote enough that the nightmares could not follow." Eleanor heard the pain beneath his words and felt a wave of compassion for this solitary man. "Did it work? Did you find peace here?" Daniel was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Some. Enough to keep living anyway. The mountains do not judge. They do not care about what you did or failed to do. They just are. There is comfort in that. I think I understand, Eleanor said. That is part of why I was willing to come west, to leave everything behind. The judgment, the whispers, the constant reminder of my mistakes. It was suffocating. The man who got you in this situation, Daniel said carefully, did he force himself on you? No, Eleanor replied, her cheeks flushing despite the cold. I was foolish enough to believe his promises. He said we would be married, that it did not matter if we anticipated our vows. I loved him, or thought I did. It turns out I did not know him at all. Daniel nodded slowly. Love can make fools of us all, but you should not have to pay for his dishonesty with your whole future. They continued climbing as the afternoon wore on, and Eleanor felt her body growing tired from the rough ride and the emotional strain of the day. Just as the sun began to dip behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they emerged into a small clearing. Eleanor gasped at what she saw. The cabin that Daniel had described as rough was actually quite impressive. It was larger than she had expected, built from massive logs that had been carefully notched and fitted together. A stone chimney rose from one end, and smoke curled invitingly from its top. A covered porch ran the length of the front, and she could see that the structure was well maintained and solid. Behind the cabin stood a sturdy barn and several outbuildings. "This is your home?" she asked in surprise. "Built most of it with my own hands over the years," Daniel said, and she detected a note of pride in his voice. "Started with just one room, but I kept adding on. Never figured I would need all this space, but I could not seem to stop building. Guess maybe I was preparing for a future I did not know I wanted." He helped her down from the wagon, and Eleanor's legs nearly buckled after the long ride. Daniel steadied her with one strong hand on her elbow, waiting until she had her balance before releasing her. "You can go on inside and get warm," he said. "I need to see to the horses and unload the supplies. There is firewood stacked beside the hearth and matches on the mantel. Make yourself at home." Eleanor approached the cabin door somewhat hesitantly, still not quite believing this was happening. She pushed it open and stepped inside, then stopped in amazement. The interior was far nicer than she had anticipated. The main room was spacious, with a large stone fireplace at one end and a kitchen area at the other. Handmade furniture, rough but sturdy and well-crafted, filled the space. She could see 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms, and everything was surprisingly clean and organized. She found the matches and soon had a fire crackling in the hearth. The warmth was immediately welcome, and she stood before the flames, holding her chilled hands out to the heat. Through the window, she could see Daniel unhitching the horses, his movements efficient and practiced. He was a man completely comfortable in his environment, capable and self-sufficient in ways she could barely imagine. By the time he came inside carrying her trunks, Eleanor had removed her traveling cloak and was looking around with growing curiosity. Daniel set the trunks down near one of the bedroom doors. "That will be your room," he said, gesturing to the door. "It has a decent bed and a chest for your clothes. I am in the other room. There is a pump in the kitchen for water, and the privy is out back, though I know that is not what you are used to. I will bring in a basin so you can wash up before supper." "Mr. Vaughn," Eleanor began, then stopped, unsure how to express what she was feeling. "I do not know how to thank you for this. You have been unbelievably kind to a complete stranger. I promise I will not be a burden. I can cook and clean and help however I can to earn my keep." Daniel shook his head. "You do not need to earn anything, Miss Orson. You are my guest, and you are carrying a child. You need to rest and take care of yourself. There will be plenty of time to worry about chores later." He moved into the kitchen area and began unpacking the supplies he had brought in. Eleanor watched him work, still trying to reconcile this gentle generosity with the intimidating appearance of the man. He seemed completely at ease with the domestic tasks, putting away flour and coffee and salt with the same competence he had shown handling the horses and driving the wagon. "Why do you keep calling me Miss Orson?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "Surely you must know that everyone in Red River will assume the worst about me, about us, once they realize I have come to live with you." Daniel paused in his work and turned to face her. "What do you want me to call you?" Eleanor would be fine. "And what should I call you?" "It seems silly to be so formal when we are living under the same roof." "Daniel is fine with me." He hesitated, then said, "As for what people will think, I suppose we could get married if you want to avoid the gossip. It would give the child a name and make things easier all around." Eleanor stared at him in shock. "You cannot be serious. You do not even know me. Why would you possibly want to marry me?" Daniel leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. "I am 38 years old, Eleanor. I have lived alone in these mountains for 2 decades. I never thought much about having a family, figured that chance had passed me by. But then I saw you standing in the street today, alone and scared but trying so hard to be brave, and something shifted in me. I thought about how empty this cabin feels sometimes, how quiet the winters are. And I thought about that baby you are carrying, who deserves a father and a name and a chance at a good life. So maybe this is me being selfish as much as generous. Maybe I want a family more than I have been willing to admit." Eleanor's heart was pounding. "But marriage is forever. You cannot just propose to someone you met a few hours ago." "Why not?" Daniel's storm cloud eyes met hers directly. "You were willing to marry Thomas Kimball sight unseen. At least you have met me, seen where you would be living. I am not saying we have to do it right away. Take some time, get to know me, see if you think you could tolerate being married to a mountain man. But I want you to know the offer is there, genuine and honest. I will treat you with respect, and I will love that child you are carrying like it is my own. That is a promise." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks before she could stop them. No one had offered her such unconditional acceptance since this whole nightmare began. Her own father had thrown her out, called her shameful and disgraceful. The man she had thought loved her had abandoned her without a second thought. But this stranger, this rough mountain man she had known for mere hours, was offering her everything she needed without judgment or conditions. "I do not understand why you would do this," she whispered. Daniel crossed the room and stood before her, though he made no move to touch her. "Life is hard, Eleanor. It is brutal and unforgiving, especially out here on the frontier. But that is exactly why we have to help each other when we can. I have lived too long alone, seen too much suffering. If I can make things better for you and your child, then maybe that is my purpose. Maybe that is why I built this cabin bigger than I needed, why I kept adding rooms like I was waiting for someone to come and fill them." Eleanor looked up into his weathered face and saw only sincerity. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met. I will take that as a compliment." A small smile tugged at his lips beneath his beard. "Now, you must be exhausted and hungry. Let me cook us some supper and then you should rest. We can talk more about everything tomorrow." He moved back to the kitchen and began preparing a meal with practiced efficiency. Eleanor watched in amazement as he made biscuits from scratch, fried salt pork and potatoes, and even managed to produce some dried apples that he stewed with cinnamon. The simple meal smelled like heaven, and Eleanor realized she had barely eaten all day. They sat at the rough wooden table as darkness fell outside and the fire crackled warmly behind them. Eleanor found herself ravenous despite her emotional exhaustion, and Daniel seemed pleased to see her eat heartily. "When is the baby due?" he asked as they finished their meal. "Late March, I believe. It is hard to be certain." Eleanor rested a hand on her stomach. I have been lucky so far. The sickness has passed and I feel relatively well, but I worry about how I will manage when the time comes. I have no experience with childbirth, no mother or sisters to guide me. There is a woman about 5 miles east of here, Martha Cunningham. She is a midwife, helped deliver most of the babies born in these parts over the past 15 years. When the time comes, I will go fetch her. You will be well cared for. Eleanor felt some of the anxiety she had been carrying ease at his words. You seem to have thought of everything. I am a planner. That is how you survive in the mountains. You anticipate what might happen and prepare for it. He stood and began clearing the dishes. You should get some sleep now. Your room has everything you need, and there are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed. If you need anything during the night, just call out. I am a light sleeper. Eleanor rose somewhat shakily, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. Thank you, Daniel, for everything. I still do not quite believe this is real. It is real, he assured her, and you are safe here. That is a promise. She made her way to the bedroom he had indicated and found it simple but comfortable. The bed was large with a thick mattress stuffed with what felt like pine needles and covered with warm quilts. She changed into her nightgown and crawled under the blankets, too tired to even properly unpack her trunks. As she lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of Daniel moving quietly around the cabin, Eleanor felt something she had not experienced in months. Hope. The next weeks passed in a way that felt almost dreamlike to Eleanor. She woke each morning to find Daniel already up, the fire blazing and coffee brewing. He would cook them breakfast, then head out to check his traps or hunt or work on various tasks around the property. Eleanor spent her days exploring the cabin, learning where everything was kept, and gradually beginning to contribute to the household work, despite Daniel's protests that she should rest. She discovered that Daniel was remarkably self-sufficient. He had a smokehouse where he cured meat, a root cellar stocked with vegetables he had grown in a garden plot during the summer, and shelves lined with preserved goods. His craftsmanship was evident everywhere she looked, from the sturdy furniture to the well-maintained tools. He was clearly a man who took pride in his work and his home. As the days passed, Eleanor found herself watching Daniel with growing fascination. He moved through the world with a quiet confidence that she found deeply appealing. He was gentle with the horses, patient when teaching her how to properly bank the fire at night, and thoughtful in countless small ways. He always made sure she was warm enough, that she had enough to eat, that she was not overexerting herself. His care was constant but never overbearing. They fell into the habit of sitting by the fire in the evenings, talking quietly about their lives. Daniel spoke little about his time in the war, but he told her stories about his childhood in Ohio, about learning to trap and hunt, about the various animals and adventures he had encountered in his 20 years in the mountains. Eleanor shared memories of her life in Philadelphia, carefully edited versions that focused on happy moments with her mother, who had died when Eleanor was 16, and her younger sister, who had been married off to a wealthy merchant the year before Eleanor's own scandal. You miss your family? Daniel asked one evening as they sat before the crackling fire. I miss my sister, Eleanor admitted. Rebecca was always kind to me, but my father, I thought I would miss him, but mostly I just feel angry. He did not even try to understand or help me. He just wanted me gone before I could embarrass him further. His loss, Daniel said simply. You are smart and strong and brave. He should have been proud to have you as a daughter. Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. You barely know me. How can you say I am strong and brave? You traveled halfway across the country alone to start a new life. You faced your situation with courage even when everything fell apart. You did not collapse in the street when you learned Kimball was dead. You made a choice and took a chance coming up here with me. That takes strength and bravery." He met her eyes across the space between their chairs. "I see it in you, Eleanor." As September faded into October, the relationship between Eleanor and Daniel continued to deepen. She began to notice small things about him that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which happened more frequently as he grew comfortable with her presence. The rumble of his deep voice when he sang quietly to himself while working outside. The gentleness of his large, scarred hands when he helped her over rough ground during their short walks around the property. One afternoon in mid-October, Eleanor was attempting to reach a jar of preserved peaches on a high shelf when she wobbled dangerously on the stool she was standing on. Daniel appeared seemingly from nowhere, his strong hand steadying her waist as he lifted her effortlessly down. "You should have called for me," he said, keeping his hands on her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "You could have fallen." Eleanor found herself breathless, acutely aware of his proximity and the warmth of his touch. "I did not want to bother you. You were working on the barn roof." "You are never a bother." His voice was low and rough. "Your safety matters more than any chore." They stood frozen for a long moment, and Eleanor saw something shift in Daniel's expression. His eyes dropped to her lips, and she thought he might kiss her. Her heart raced at the prospect, and she realized with sudden clarity that she wanted him to. But then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I will get the peaches for you," he said, reaching up easily to retrieve the jar. "What are you planning to make?" "I thought I might attempt a pie," Eleanor said, disappointed by his withdrawal but also touched by his restraint. He was keeping his promise not to force his attentions on her, even though the attraction between them was becoming increasingly obvious. That evening, as they ate the slightly lopsided but delicious peach pie Eleanor had managed to produce, Daniel set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Eleanor, I know it has only been a few weeks, but I need to ask you something. Have you given any more thought to my proposal about getting married?" Eleanor's pulse quickened. She had thought about little else if she was honest with herself. "I have thought about it constantly." "And what have you decided?" She took a deep breath. "I think I would like to accept, but I have concerns. You have been nothing but kind to me, Daniel, but I worry that you are doing this out of pity or obligation. I do not want you to feel trapped or to regret this decision later." Daniel pushed back from the table and came around to kneel beside her chair, taking her hand gently in his much larger one. "Look at me, Eleanor." When she did, she saw nothing but sincerity in those storm cloud eyes. "I am not doing this out of pity. Yes, I wanted to help you when I first saw you in town, but what I am feeling now is something else entirely. I have come to care for you deeply these past weeks. I look forward to seeing you each morning. I find myself rushing through my work so I can come back inside and talk with you. I think about you constantly when I am out checking the traps. This is not obligation. This is me wanting to build a life with you if you will have me." Eleanor felt tears welling in her eyes. "But the baby, you would be taking on another man's child." "I would be taking on our child," Daniel corrected firmly. "From the moment we marry, that baby will be mine in every way that matters. I will love it, protect it, raise it as my own. I swear that to you on my life." "You truly mean that?" It was not a question. Eleanor could see the truth written plainly on his face, "With everything in me." He squeezed her hand gently. "I know this is not the romantic courtship you probably dreamed of as a girl. I know I am rough around the edges, that this life is hard and isolated. But I will do my best to make you happy, Eleanor. I will work every day to be worthy of your trust." Eleanor made her decision in that moment, following an instinct that had been growing stronger with each passing day. "Yes, Daniel, I will marry you." The smile that spread across his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You have made me very happy. Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for saving me," Eleanor whispered. "You have given me back my life, my hope, my future. I will do everything I can to be a good wife to you." They decided to marry as soon as possible, and the following day Daniel hitched up the wagon and they made the journey back down to Red River. Eleanor was noticeably more pregnant than she had been on her arrival, and she was acutely aware of the stares and whispers as they walked together to the small church. Reverend Matthews, a kind-faced man in his 60s, welcomed them warmly. "Daniel Vaughn, I do not think I have seen you in church in all the years I have been here. What brings you to town?" "I want to get married, Reverend. This is Eleanor Orson. She arrived last month to marry Thomas Kimball, but as you know, Thomas passed before she got here. I am asking her to be my wife instead." The Reverend's eyes moved to Eleanor's visible pregnancy, but his expression remained kind and non-judgmental. "I see. And you, Miss Orson, are you entering into this marriage of your own free will?" "I am," Eleanor said firmly. "Daniel has been nothing but honorable and kind to me. I am choosing this freely and gladly." "Then I am happy to perform the ceremony. Do you have witnesses?" Daniel nodded. "I asked Martha Cunningham and her husband to meet us here." Sure enough, within a few minutes, a sturdy woman in her 50s arrived with a weathered man Eleanor assumed was her husband. Martha's sharp eyes took in Eleanor's condition immediately, but her smile was warm. "So you are the mail-order bride who ended up with our mountain man instead of poor Thomas," Martha said, taking Eleanor's hand in a firm grip. "Daniel is a good man, probably the best in these mountains. You could do far worse." "That is exactly what I told her," Daniel said with a slight smile. The ceremony was simple and brief. Eleanor wore her best dress, a deep green traveling suit that still fit reasonably well. Daniel had cleaned up and trimmed his beard, and he looked almost nervous as they stood before the Reverend. When it came time to exchange vows, his deep voice was steady and sure. "I, Daniel Vaughn, take you, Eleanor Orson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect you, provide for you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to love and care for your child as my own, and to do everything in my power to make you happy." Eleanor's voice shook with emotion as she replied, "I, Eleanor Orson, take you, Daniel Vaughn, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to be a faithful and devoted wife, to build a home with you, and to face whatever comes with courage and love." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Eleanor's lips. It was her first kiss since arriving in Montana, and it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. His lips were soft beneath his beard, and his hand was gentle as it cupped her cheek. They signed the marriage certificate, and Martha hugged Eleanor warmly. "You come see me when your time gets close," she said quietly. "I will make sure you and the baby are well cared for." As they left the church, Eleanor noticed that the whispers and stares had taken on a different quality. She was a respectable married woman now, not a fallen woman trying to trap some unsuspecting man. She held her head high and took Daniel's offered arm, feeling proud to be his wife. On the ride back up to the cabin, Daniel reached over and took her hand. "How do you feel, Mrs. Vaughn?" Eleanor tested the name silently and found she liked the sound of it. "Happy," she said truthfully. "Hopeful. A little frightened about what comes next, but mostly happy." "That seems like a reasonable collection of emotions." He squeezed her hand gently. "We will figure everything out together." "You are not alone anymore, Eleanor. You will never be alone again." That night, after they returned to the cabin, Eleanor felt nervous about the sleeping arrangements. They were married now, which meant Daniel would have expectations. She had prepared herself to fulfill her wifely duties despite her pregnancy, but she was anxious about the intimacy. Daniel seemed to sense her tension. As they prepared for bed, he said quietly, "Eleanor, I want you to sleep in your own room tonight as you have been. I meant what I said about respecting you. I will not press you for anything you are not ready to give. When you want to share a bed with me, you need only say so. Until then, I am content to wait." Eleanor felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Thank you for understanding. It is not that I do not find you attractive, because I do, very much so. I am just not quite ready for that kind of intimacy yet." "There is no rush," Daniel assured her. "We have our whole lives ahead of us. A few weeks or months will not matter in the long run." As October turned to November, Eleanor settled more fully into her role as Daniel's wife. She took over most of the cooking and cleaning, finding satisfaction in caring for their home. Her belly grew more prominent with each passing week, and Daniel seemed fascinated by the changes in her body. He would sometimes rest his hand gently on her stomach, his face filled with wonder when he felt the baby move. "It is real," he said one evening, his large hand spread across her belly as the baby kicked. "There is really a life growing in there." "Very real," Eleanor laughed. "Especially at 3 in the morning when this child decides to practice acrobatics." Daniel looked up at her with an expression of such tenderness it made her breath catch. "You are beautiful, you know. I do not think I tell you that enough, but you are, especially now, carrying this child. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes, as seemed to happen frequently these days. "I feel enormous and awkward." "You are creating life," Daniel said simply. "That is beautiful beyond measure." The first serious snow came in mid-November, and Eleanor woke one morning to find the world transformed into a winter wonderland. Everything was covered in a thick blanket of white, and more snow continued to fall steadily. "We are snowed in now until spring," Daniel told her over breakfast. "The pass down to Red River will be impassable within a day or two. We will have everything we need here, but we will be truly alone for the next few months." Eleanor found the thought surprisingly appealing. She had grown to love the quiet solitude of the mountain cabin, the peaceful routine of their days. The idea of spending the winter months with just Daniel for company seemed wonderful rather than frightening. As the snow piled higher and the temperatures dropped, Eleanor and Daniel were forced into even closer proximity. They spent long hours sitting by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Daniel taught her to play chess using a carved set he had made himself. She taught him some of the songs she had learned as a child in Philadelphia. They read aloud to each other from the small collection of books Daniel had accumulated over the years. One particularly cold night in early December, Eleanor was shivering despite the roaring fire and the layers of blankets wrapped around her. Daniel noticed and frowned. "You are freezing. Come here." He opened his arms invitingly. Eleanor hesitated only a moment before moving into his embrace. He wrapped his powerful arms around her, and immediately she felt warmer. His body radiated heat like a furnace, and she snuggled closer, resting her head against his broad chest. "Better?" he asked, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. "Much better," she admitted. "You are remarkably warm. All these years living in the cold have taught my body to produce heat efficiently." His hand moved in slow circles on her back, soothing and comforting. "You can always come to me when you are cold, Eleanor. I am happy to warm you." They sat that way for a long time, and Eleanor felt something shift between them. The physical closeness broke down another barrier, made them more comfortable with each other. After that night, it became common for them to sit together. Eleanor tucked against Daniel's side as they read or talked or simply enjoyed the quiet. Christmas approached, and Eleanor found herself wishing she had something special to give Daniel. He had given her so much, had saved her and protected her, and asked for nothing in return. She secretly began working on a shirt for him, using fabric she found in one of the trunks in her room, and carefully sewing by firelight when he was outside doing chores. Daniel, meanwhile, seemed to be engaged in his own secret project. Eleanor would catch him carving something by the fire, but he always hid it when she tried to see what he was making. On Christmas morning, Eleanor woke to find Daniel had already been up for hours. The cabin smelled of fresh bread and coffee, and he had somehow procured a small pine tree that he had decorated with carved wooden ornaments. "Merry Christmas," he said with a shy smile when she emerged from her room. "I know it is not much, but I wanted you to have a tree." Seemed important somehow, marking our first Christmas together. Eleanor was so touched she burst into tears, which had become her unfortunate habit during pregnancy. "It is perfect, Daniel. Absolutely perfect." They exchanged their gifts after breakfast. Eleanor presented the shirt she had made, and Daniel's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "This is the finest shirt I have ever owned," he said, running his hands over the careful stitching. "Thank you, Eleanor. I will treasure it." Then he produced his gift for her, a beautiful cradle carved from smooth pine and polished to a soft glow. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with intricate designs carved into the headboard and rockers that curved perfectly. "For the baby," he said quietly. "I have been working on it since you first arrived. I wanted it to be ready before the child comes." Eleanor ran her fingers over the smooth wood, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "Oh, Daniel, how can I ever thank you for everything you have done for us?" He crossed to her and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. "You already have. You have given me a purpose, a reason to look forward to the future instead of just enduring each day. You have brought warmth and life to this cabin. You have made me happier than I ever thought I could be." Eleanor looked up into his weathered face and felt her heart swell with emotion. "I love you," she said, the words emerging before she had consciously decided to speak them. "I think I have been falling in love with you since that first day, but I was too afraid to admit it. But I love you, Daniel Vaughn. I love you with everything in me." The expression on Daniel's face was one of pure joy. "Eleanor, I have loved you since I saw you standing in that street, trying so hard to be brave. I have loved you more with each passing day. You are everything I never knew I needed." He bent his head and kissed her, and this time there was nothing gentle or restrained about it. This kiss was full of passion and promise, a claiming and a vow. Eleanor wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the love and desire that had been building inside her for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor said, "I want to share your bed tonight. I want to truly be your wife in every way." "Are you sure?" Daniel searched her face carefully. "I do not want you to feel pressured. The baby is fine. I am fine. More than fine." She took his hand and placed it on her belly. "I love you, and I want to be close to you. Please, Daniel, I am ready." That night, Daniel carried her to his room and laid her gently on the large bed. He made love to her with a tenderness and care that brought tears to her eyes. He was careful of her pregnant belly, mindful of her comfort, and wholly focused on her pleasure. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Eleanor felt a sense of completeness she had never known. "I cannot believe I am this happy," she whispered against his chest. "A few months ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I would spend the rest of my days alone and ashamed. But you changed everything." Daniel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We changed everything together. You were brave enough to take a chance on me on this life." That took more courage than I think you realize. The winter months passed in a cocoon of happiness. Eleanor and Daniel grew closer with each passing day, learning each other's bodies and hearts. They made love frequently, always with Daniel's careful attention to her comfort and the baby's safety. They talked for hours about their hopes and dreams for the future, about the child that was coming, about the life they would build together. In late January, Eleanor woke one morning feeling different. The baby seemed to have dropped lower, and she felt an unfamiliar pressure. She mentioned it to Daniel, who immediately went into protective mode. "That means the birth is getting closer," he said, his face showing his worry. "Maybe only a few weeks now. I am going to need to get Martha up here soon before the weather gets any worse." A heavy snowstorm the next day prevented any travel, and Eleanor could see Daniel's anxiety increasing. But the storm passed, and 3 days later, he set out on horseback to fetch the midwife. Eleanor spent the day nervously preparing, washing tiny baby clothes she had sewn and arranging the cradle beside their bed. Daniel returned late that afternoon with Martha, who had brought several bags of supplies. She took one look at Eleanor and nodded approvingly. "You look healthy and strong," she said. "That baby is sitting nice and low, so I would say we are looking at maybe 2 weeks, possibly less. I will stay here until the child comes, if that is acceptable to you both." "Absolutely," Daniel said immediately. "Take the guest room. Whatever you need, it is yours." Martha was a reassuring presence in the cabin. She had delivered hundreds of babies over her career as a midwife, and her calm confidence helped ease Eleanor's growing anxiety. She examined Eleanor thoroughly and pronounced everything normal and healthy. The labor pains started on a cold February morning, 2 weeks after Martha's arrival. Eleanor woke to a cramping sensation in her lower back and knew immediately what was happening. She reached over and touched Daniel's shoulder. "It is time," she said simply. Daniel was out of bed in an instant, pulling on clothes and rushing to wake Martha. The older woman appeared looking remarkably alert for having just been roused from sleep. "How far apart are the pains?" she asked Eleanor. "I have only had 2 so far, maybe 10 minutes apart." "Then we have time," Martha said calmly. "First babies tend to take a while. Daniel, make yourself useful and get the fire going strong. Boil water and fetch all those clean linens I had you set aside. Eleanor, you can walk around for now. Movement often helps in early labor." The day passed in a blur of increasing pain and discomfort. Martha was constantly at Eleanor's side, offering encouragement and support. Daniel hovered anxiously, clearly feeling helpless, but trying his best to be useful. He held Eleanor's hand through contractions, wiped her face with cool cloths, and whispered words of love and encouragement. As night fell and the labor intensified, Eleanor found herself gripping Daniel's hand so hard she thought she might break his fingers. But he never complained, never left her side. "You are doing so well," he told her over and over. "You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known. I love you so much, Eleanor." Finally, in the early hours of the morning, Martha announced that it was time to push. The next hour was the hardest of Eleanor's life, but Daniel stayed right there with her, supporting her back and speaking constant encouragement. And then, suddenly, there was a new sound in the cabin. A baby's cry, loud and healthy and absolutely perfect. "It is a boy," Martha announced, quickly cleaning the infant and wrapping him in soft blankets. "A big, healthy boy." She placed the baby in Eleanor's arms, and Eleanor looked down at the tiny face, the dark hair, the perfect little fingers. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she counted 10 fingers and 10 toes, marveling at the miracle of this new life. "Hello, my sweet boy," she whispered. "I am your mother. I love you so much already." She looked up at Daniel and saw tears running down his weathered face as well. He reached out and gently touched the baby's head with one massive, gentle finger. "He is perfect," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Absolutely perfect. May I hold him?" Eleanor carefully transferred the baby to Daniel's arms, and the sight of this large, powerful man cradling the tiny infant so tenderly made her heart overflow with love. Daniel looked down at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. "Hello, son," he said softly. "I am your father. I am going to love you and protect you for as long as I live. That is a promise." "What should we name him?" Eleanor asked. They had discussed names before, but Daniel had insisted that Eleanor should have the final say. Now, looking at the baby in Daniel's arms, she knew exactly what his name should be. "I want to name him after you," she said. "Daniel Vaughn, Jr., if that is acceptable to you." Daniel looked up at her with such love in his eyes that it took her breath away. "It would be my greatest honor." Martha finished her work and declared both mother and baby healthy. "You did wonderfully, Eleanor. And you, Daniel Vaughn, are already a natural father. That boy is lucky to have you both." Little Daniel, as they quickly began calling him, was an easy baby. He nursed well and slept in long stretches, much to Eleanor's relief. Daniel was utterly besotted with his son, holding him every chance he got and talking to him constantly in that deep, gentle voice. Martha stayed for another week to make sure Eleanor and the baby were doing well, then allowed Daniel to escort her back to her home. When he returned, it was just the three of them, alone in their mountain cabin with the snow still falling outside. The months that followed were a revelation to Eleanor. She had never imagined she could be this happy, this content. Watching Daniel with their son filled her with such love she sometimes thought her heart might burst. He was an involved and loving father, changing diapers and walking the baby when he was fussy and singing old songs in his rumbling bass voice. As spring arrived and the snow began to melt, Eleanor realized she had been in Montana for a year. 1 year since she had stepped off that stagecoach, pregnant and alone and terrified. 1 year since Daniel had offered her a chance at a new life. One warm May afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching little Daniel play on a blanket in the sunshine, Eleanor reached over and took her husband's hand. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Marrying me, taking on another man's child?" Daniel looked at her in surprise. "Regret it?" "Eleanor, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You and Daniel have given me more happiness than I ever dreamed possible. I wake up grateful every single day that I happened to be in Red River the day you arrived." "I feel the same way," Eleanor said softly. "You saved my life, Daniel. You gave me back my hope and my future. I love you more than words can express." He leaned over and kissed her gently. "I love you too. You and our son are everything to me." Over the next few years, their family grew. In the spring of 1881, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, who had Daniel's storm cloud eyes and her mother's delicate features. 2 years later, another son arrived, who they named Thomas in honor of the man whose death had indirectly brought them together. Daniel expanded the cabin even further, adding more bedrooms to accommodate their growing family. He taught young Daniel to hunt and fish, passing on his knowledge of the mountains and wilderness. Eleanor created a warm and loving home, filling it with laughter and music and the chaos of young children. They made periodic trips down to Red River, where they gradually became accepted as part of the community. People who had whispered about Eleanor's arrival now smiled and greeted the Vaughn family warmly. Young Daniel was popular with the other children, and no one ever questioned his parentage. He was Daniel Vaughn's son in every way that mattered. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Daniel surprised Eleanor with a gold locket containing tiny photographs of their children. She wore it every day, treasuring this reminder of the family they had built together. "You remember that first day?" she asked him as they sat by the fire that evening, the children asleep in their beds. "When you saw me standing in the street?" "I remember every detail," Daniel said, pulling her close against his side. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen, standing there trying not to cry even though your whole world had just fallen apart. I remember thinking you were the most intimidating man I had ever encountered," Eleanor admitted with a laugh. "I was terrified of you at first. You were so large and rough-looking. And now," Daniel asked with a smile, "now I know you are the gentlest, kindest man alive. You have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known." She turned to look up at him. "You kept your promise, Daniel. You said you would love our son as your own, and you have. He does not even know any other father but you. You have given him everything a boy could need." "He is my son," Daniel said simply. "Blood does not make a family. Love makes a family. And I love that boy with everything in me, just like I love Sarah and Thomas and you. You are all my family, my whole world." Eleanor kissed him tenderly. "We are so lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one," Daniel insisted. "I was half alive before you came, just going through the motions. You brought me back to life, gave me a reason to live instead of just survive." As the years continued to pass, the Vaughn family flourished. Young Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man who shared his father's love of the mountains. He learned to trap and hunt, to read the weather and the signs of the wilderness. At 18, he married a girl from Red River and built his own cabin not far from his parents' place. Sarah inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's practicality. She became a teacher in Red River, helping to educate the children of the growing community. Thomas showed an aptitude for working with wood like his father, and he and Daniel spent countless hours together in the workshop Daniel had built, crafting furniture and tools. Eleanor and Daniel's love only deepened with time. They grew old together in their mountain cabin, surrounded by children and eventually grandchildren. Daniel's hair turned silver, and Eleanor's face showed the lines of a life well lived, but the love in their eyes when they looked at each other never dimmed. On a warm summer evening, when they were both well into their 60s, they sat on the porch of the cabin Daniel had built so many years ago. Grandchildren played in the yard, and they could see the smoke from young Daniel's chimney rising in the distance. "Who would have thought?" Eleanor said softly, watching the golden light paint the mountains. "That day I arrived in Red River, I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was just beginning." Daniel took her hand, his grip still strong despite his years. "Best day of my life seeing you step off that stagecoach. I knew right then, even though I did not understand it, that you were going to change everything." "We changed everything together," Eleanor corrected. "You gave me a home, a family, a life full of love and purpose. You kept every promise you ever made to me. Loving you and our children has been the easiest thing I have ever done," Daniel said. "Thank you for taking a chance on a rough mountain man. Thank you for building this life with me." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, feeling the same sense of peace and contentment she had felt since the first time he had held her in his arms. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every single moment, every choice, every challenge. It all led us here, to this beautiful life we have built together." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Daniel wrapped his arm around Eleanor and held her close. Their grandchildren's laughter echoed across the clearing, and the smoke from multiple family cabins rose into the evening air. What had started as a desperate gamble, A mail-order bride arriving pregnant with another man's child had blossomed into a legacy of love that would endure for generations. Daniel pressed a kiss to Eleanor's silver hair and whispered, "I love you, Mrs. Vaughn, today, tomorrow, and always." "And I love you," Eleanor replied. "My mountain man, my savior, my forever love." They sat together as darkness fell. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful and lasting from the broken pieces of their pasts. In the wilderness of Montana Territory, in a cabin built by hand and filled with love, Eleanor and Daniel Vaughn had found their happily ever after. And it was more perfect than either of them could have ever imagined that cold September day when a pregnant mail-order bride had trusted a stranger with her life, and he had promised to love her child as his own.